Hello, this is Philosophy 74 Ethics, and this is our week 4, right in the semester. Still a part of the first section of the class, the first part, which is about ethics and the law, the distinction, the conflict at times between ethics and the law. The moral law, as we will see with Immanuel Kant tonight, and although this is redundant, the legal law, the human-made law. And so we started with Plato's Euthyphro, the Apology. We did that in class in a face-to-face situation. And then last week I spoke briefly in a video, right, that I will make every week, right, on about Sophocles' Antigone. And Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail, so also about the question of civil disobedience and so on the question of what is the moral problem that arises when the law, the human-made law, right, is unjust, right? Because one of the questions that we saw, one of the questions is precisely the distinction also between the just and unjust law. So today we speak briefly about Immanuel Kant. You should read the fundamental principles of the metaphysics of morals. You know that again it's a difficult book, especially focused on the highlighted sections. Passages highlighted by me. But again, the idea is, the key word that I put on the syllabus is categorical imperative, which is the most important concept in this book by Kant. I mean, in his moral theory, what is this categorical imperative? Okay, because we had to be brief. Okay, so I will go directly to the central moment of this important and difficult concept. First of all, categorical means absolute, and imperative also means, the same, right? Imperative is a must, right? So it is a double must, right? So the idea in Kant is that when I follow the categorical imperative, which means to say that I follow the moral law, then I do so on the basis of a very strict, very strong obligation that I myself, implement, because then anyone, become the legislator through the categorical imperative itself. Okay, so the categorical imperative says that I do what I do because I must do it. And the formulation of the categorical imperative is a little difficult. You find it, first of all, on page, there are two formulations, so to speak. You find one on page, the bottom of page 24 of right, your text, which is in bold, actually, and Kant says, act as though the maxim of your action were to become, through your will, a universal law of nature. So that means through your will, that you choose to do so, you bring yourself under the moral law. This is really what it is for Kant to understand, to stand under the moral law, but there is a subjective moment. I must will it. I must choose to do so myself, because I could also say, I don't care about the moral law, I don't want to stand under it. So it is through my will that I act in such a way that my maxim, the maxim of my action, can become universal, a universal law, meaning that my action as such, the action that I do today, right now, cannot be universal. It is particular. Any action is particular. Even if I do the same tomorrow, it is still a different action. If you do something similar to what I do, that's a different action. But the maxim, which is to say, the reason, if you will, the driver, the principle of the maxim can be universalized. Okay, for example, if we agree that harming people is wrong, then the question is not when and where and what are the circumstances in which it is wrong. It is wrong period. It doesn't matter what precisely the circumstances are. It cannot change from place to place, time to time. So a law like this, if we agree that that is, again, common, that always must be in place, then that is a maximum. Okay, so and it can become universal. So I don't know if this is clear. Again, the language is a bit difficult, but so the idea is that I can, for Kant, follow, comply with the human-made law, the law of the city, the law of the state, and so on and so forth, and I may coincidentally, right, do the right thing. However, I am not a moral person unless I do it with a given intention, the intention of complying with the moral law. Right? For example, if I uh, uh, find money, somewhere, and a wallet with money, and I give it back to the person who lost it. The question is, why do I do that? I mean, for Kant, the question is always the intention, the reason why I do what I do. Because outwardly, from the outside, externally, the action may look moral even when it isn't. I mean, if I do that, for example, say, if I help someone because I want to show off with my friends and so on, or because, I do the right thing because I see that there are video cameras around and so on and so forth. I don't want to get caught and so on and so forth. Or even from a religious point of view, I mean, if I refrain from doing wrong things, from harming and so on and so forth, only because I am afraid that I may go to hell when I die, then that is not a moral um, action, and I am not a moral person. I may be doing coincidentally, right? They say the right thing. I mean, what outwardly from the outside seems to be the right action, but I'm not doing it for the right reason. Okay, so the categorical imperative is very severe, very strict. So the question is, we also had, you should think about this, whether it is applicable at all. One example that I developed as I was teaching also bioethics is this. I mean, if I work, say, as a nurse, and then today, then they take to the hospital someone like my neighbor, for example, with whom I have a terrible relationship that I hate, and so on and so forth. But then I had to tend to this person the same way in which, to this patient, the same way in which I would do with any other one. I do so by taking distance from my right passions, my inclinations, and ultimately from my experience, and do what every nurse should do, and treat the patient as I would precisely treat any other one. Okay, so when I do that, then I'm not acting on the basis of my sympathy, my emotions, feelings, passions, inclinations, and so on, but I am acting from the point of view of the universal, from the universality of what then becomes the moral law, which is higher for Kant than again the human-made juridical positive law. Okay, so this is again, when I do that, then I can universalize. I cannot again, remember, I cannot universalize my action. My action cannot become universal, but I can universalize the reason why I act the way I do. Okay, so I refrain from harming people, from harming this person, because harming people in general and universally is wrong. So I hope that this is clear. Then there is another, because I see it's already longer than I wanted it to be, but there is another formulation which is really ultimately, this is also called, right, the principle of the kingdom of ends, right? And I don't know if the translation is the same in your text, but it is the kingdom of ends. Okay, so the idea is this. That's what on page 29, the bottom of page 29, you find this important statement again. Acts in such a way as to treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of anyone else, always as an end and never merely as a means. What does that mean? It means that every time we do something, we interact with someone, but even with ourselves, right? We should treat humanity, the humanity in the other, in the others, and in ourselves. Always as an end and never merely as a means, which is interesting that he says merely as a means, because the instrumental way in which we treat ourselves and others for Kant is not altogether wrong, right? But there should be also this attention to this focus on the question of the end, that everybody, every human being is an end in themselves, right? I don't know if this is clear. I mean, ultimately, we use one another to an extent. I mean, when, for example, in social interactions, if I take the bus, right, the bus driver, then I relate to the bus driver and the bus driver to me in an instrumental way, right? I mean, we are means to one another. The bus driver will be precisely the means whereby I get home, and again, the passengers are the means for so that the bus driver can be a bus driver, and so on and so forth. Okay, so but the question is, the bus driver is still a human being. In addition to and prior to being a bus driver, and I am also a human being in addition to and before being a passenger or whatever I am. Okay, so this dimension, which is the most important dimension in humanity for Kant in ethics, must always be kept not only in mind too, because it is a mental attitude for Kant, the intention, right? But also in actual interaction. Okay, so again, this is the kingdom of ends in which ultimately everybody is an end in themselves, and it is in this sphere that then Kant says that we also are all legislators, okay, because uh, fundamentally the law that we understand, the law that right, the moral law that we stand under, uh, then becomes our own law. Okay, so in the kingdom of ends, also you will find Kant says that everybody is sovereign. Instead of kingdom, actually, I see in your version it says realm, right? Realm, kingdom of ends, realm of ends, same idea. But then, everything has a price or a dignity, okay? Price is, of course, interchangeable. Things are on the basis of price, things are interchangeable with one another. But dignity is completely different, right? Because every human being, every being, one might say, has their own dignity, which is irreplaceable. And so this is what then the sphere of morality is for Kant, the level, the plane of morality, of ethics, which is more fundamental than whatever than the positive law may or may not say. Okay, because again, I'm being very simplistic here, but again, the question ethics and the law, the moral law and the human-made law, they may coincide. Very often they don't. Okay, and in this case, when this happens, then we have precisely a big problem, an interesting, at least, problem from the ethical point of view. Okay, well, I hope that this makes sense. But remember, that you should again, my office hours that are now open basically throughout the day. You can. I gave you my contacts, various contacts. You can be in touch if you have questions. Speak to me, and also remember, do write your entries, write your comments and on the discussion board forum. Okay, so see you soon. Okay, bye.